All right. Good evening, everybody from Davidson. All of us here hope that you and your families are well and that you're making the most of this unusual and challenging summer. My name is Chris Alexander, and I have the pleasure of serving as your moderator for this town hall panel. I'm glad you're with us, and I want to say a special word of welcome to first-year students. We are so excited to have you joining the Davidson community, and we're so thrilled that you could be with us tonight. I know that you're anxious to learn lots more about the fall semester, and you get to spend the next hour with the group of people who, more than anybody else, have worked so hard for so many weeks to put together a plan for the fall that respects the values that undergird this community and that provides you with the very best experience that we possibly can provide. I'll introduce them to you in just a moment, but first, let's take care of a couple of housekeeping details. You may have noticed that you can't see each other and your chat function doesn't work. This is a Zoom webinar, which operates a little bit differently than the kinds of Zoom meetings that you may be accustomed to. We're going to work this evening with questions that you submitted in advance. You submitted lots of them, and they're good, they're comprehensive. We got so many great questions that we're not going to be able to take additional questions over the course of our hour together, and we almost certainly won't be able to answer all of the questions that you submitted. We are recording this session. You'll be able to refer to it again, and of course, we'll continue to update the college's FAQ page where you can always find the most up-to-date information about our plans for the fall. Now, in selecting questions for tonight, we really tried to honor two commitments. First of all, we've tried to select questions that we know are of interest and concern to the largest number of you. You're all largely interested in the same kinds of questions. So we saw lots of versions of the same questions, and that's completely understandable. So we tried to pay attention to those. And secondly, we have tried to pay special attention to questions that don't already have pretty good clear answers over on the FAQ page, just so that we can focus our time tonight on the kinds of things that we know are really important to you and that you're not likely to already have sufficient information about. So that's how we're going to operate tonight. So with that, let me introduce to you our panelists. First and foremost, we are so pleased to have President Carol Quillen with us. Most of these people you know, by the way. Dean Byron McCrae is with us. Dean McCrae is Davidson's Dean of Students and the Vice President for Student Life. Dean Philip Jefferson is with us. Dean Jefferson is Dean of the Faculty and the Vice President for Academic Affairs. I'm also pleased to introduce to you tonight someone who may not be familiar to you. It's a great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Robert Lutz. Dr. Lutz is a physician with Atrium Healthcare here in Charlotte. Atrium is one of Davidson's healthcare partners. Dr. Lutz is the chief architect of Davidson's COVID-19 health planning strategy. Dr. Lutz's experience includes 30 years experience in the military and extensive experience dealing with the treatment and prevention of infectious diseases. So we are all in very good hands with Dr. Lutz on board. So with that, I want to turn the floor over to President Quillen.
Thank you so much, Chris, and good evening, afternoon, everybody. It's really nice to see you in my brain. I'm seeing you. I'm sorry that I can't see you on the screen. It's more engaging to be able to talk when I can see your faces, but I did just want to welcome you and speak very briefly before we get to your questions. So as I was reviewing all of the questions that were submitted by our students, by our parents, I thought it might be helpful initially to sort of just step back and talk a little bit about the values that are underlying the decisions that we're making. So this is a time of great uncertainty, and it's extremely difficult to predict nationally what's going to happen from one week to the next. So in an environment of extreme uncertainty where we recognize we might have to revisit decisions that we make, we might have to rethink protocols that we put in place, it's important for us to remind ourselves of the values that are underlying the actions that we're taking every day here at Davidson College. And because you joined the Davidson community, these values will be familiar to you. They're probably one of the reasons why you were interested in joining this community. So I'm gonna just list them, and then of course acknowledge that these values are often in tension, but just so that we're clear on how we try to evaluate every decision that we make. And when we revisit decisions, we always try to honor these values that underlie the Davidson community. So these values I would put into two categories. One is sort of the things we always want to respect. So safety and well-being of every member of our community. Solidarity, we are a community that thinks about other people. When we make decisions for ourselves, we recognize that our actions have an impact on others, and that community solidarity extends beyond our campus to the town and to the neighboring community. Equity, we care a lot about making sure that our environment is equitable, that all of our community members, faculty, staff, and students feel seen and heard, and we can make sure that they are able to enjoy the opportunities that being a part of Davidson affords. Quality, we're committed to the highest quality educational opportunities that we can offer you. And collective responsibility, we acknowledge that we're all in this together and that we have a shared sense of responsibility for the well-being of the community. So those are the things that really underlie Davidson as a community, as an educational, intellectual campus, as an intellectual community that seeks the truth. When we're making decisions, we want to think about the things that matter to us in that context. So these are accountability. We want to be accountable for the decisions that we make to our community. We want to be clear. We want to try to communicate as clearly as we possibly can. We make every decision in a spirit of humility, recognizing all the things we don't know and that this is a one day at a time situation. We want to make decisions that are feasible to implement. We don't want to have decisions that we can't honor down the road. And we want to be flexible. This is a situation that requires flexibility, requires us to be willing to rethink what we thought was true 3 months ago, and always to be willing to re-engage. So those values are constant, even as the environment around us changes. And we're trying to honor those as we make decisions. I mentioned in particular solidarity and collective responsibility. These are important cornerstones of the Davidson community, and they really shape how we think about what we can do. So that means we're all in this together. We really rely on you as our students to buy into what we're trying to accomplish. This is a shared calling this semester. How do we come back together as a community? How do we protect the safety and well-being of one another? And how do we continue to create the highest quality educational opportunities for everyone on our campus? So with that in mind, I think that will help you to think about how we talk about some of the decisions that we're making. And it will, I think, help you understand the expectations that we must have of one another in this very different fall semester. It's a semester that's very different from what we've seen in the past. And it's a semester that no one could really anticipate. And at the same time, it provides us with the opportunities to live out our values every day and to strive to be the community that Davidson calls us to be. So with that introduction, let me stop talking and turn initially to Dr. Lutz, who perhaps you know a little bit less well than you know the rest of us, and ask him just to maybe say a few words. A lot of your questions will be directed to him. So I'll turn it over then to Dr. Lutz.
Good evening. Many of you are athletes out there, and you probably run into me in the training room or out on the field. But I've been at Davidson for about 2 years now. I came from the U.S. Army, where I spent 30 years as an Army medical officer. And one of the things they drill into us really from the time we're young medical officers is that disease and non-battle injury is the most common producer of casualties on the battlefield. So no matter what you think about bullets and all this other stuff, it's these disease vectors that cause the most problem. And so over the course of my training and over the course of my 14 deployments, I was continually putting into action preventive medicine plans for things like malaria, diarrheal disease, leishmaniasis, Chagas, a bunch of different types of things that we see around the world. And there's a common pattern there, which is to identify the threat, which we've done in the case of this virus, understand the vectors, which vectors are the way it's transmitted, so airborne respiratory droplets or through touch, et cetera, and then put into place control measures that help slow that spread down. And then you reevaluate and you kind of do a continued circle to keep everybody safe. And so that's kind of the experience that I brought into this. I'm not an infectious disease physician. I was trained in emergency medicine, but I do have backup through my healthcare system. And I've talked with our infectious disease physicians in Atrium Health quite a bit about things that we're doing. And so we've got that capability to help bring to bear as we return to school.
Thank you, Dr. Lutz. And if I may, I'd like to stick with you for the first couple of questions, because I do think that issues related to health are first and foremost on people's minds tonight. I think we all know that we are, as a country, currently experiencing a surge in COVID-19 cases. That has prompted some rethinking in many quarters about how testing will work. So understanding that this is a fluid situation, what can you tell us now about how testing will work? And what I mean by that is, what will students need to do before they come to campus? Once they're here, who gets tested, how often? Let's start there, and then I'll ask a couple of follow-up questions.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. What we're looking to do is test every student prior to coming on campus. And that will involve a test that is mailed to your home of record. So if you haven't updated your address recently, please do that before we start generating those address labels. You will take it prior to coming. The results will be delivered to you and to me in order to determine whether you can come to campus or not. And so if you're negative, you're good. You're on the way to campus. If you're positive, we'll reach out and we'll say, we need you to wait for a couple of weeks before you come. You can start class virtually, but then we'll be prepared to receive you once everything's said and done. The goal of that program is to identify those students that are asymptomatic prior to coming to campus and keep them out of the population as we come together as a group. I understand that this is not a perfect process, and due to the limitations of testing, it's a snapshot in time. And because of that snapshot, it doesn't mean we can't let our guard down when you come back to campus. There will still be all these requirements. We have just, I'll use the term, we use it in cancer surgery, debulked the number of students that are infected, so we start with a relatively fresh plate. So once you're here, what does testing look like then? So there's a process by which we want you to identify yourself if you start to have symptoms that are consistent with COVID. We've got an application that you can use mobile that on a regular basis you check in, you identify that you have no symptoms and you're good to go. When you do have symptoms and you identify them on the application, that generates two things. One is a message to you that gives you instructions to call student health to begin to isolate and kind of step back from others until we can get you evaluated and tested, if need be. And so when you look at these symptoms, you're going to see that a number of them are fairly common. So who hasn't had a runny nose in North Carolina? It's the allergy capital of the world. It happens. Who hasn't had a sore throat or watery eyes or nausea and vomiting or diarrhea? Those are what we call COVID-associated symptoms. Then there's what I would call the red symptoms, which are the ones that are really associated. So that's a high fever, shortness of breath, coughing, body aches, chills, etc. Any of those that you identify will trigger this evaluation in a virtual manner where we get some vital signs, we get some information, you talk to myself or one of the student health providers, and we kind of come up with a plan. So is this the runny nose that you get every year when you come back to Davidson? If so, we're good. If you got a fever of 103, you're coughing, you're feeling a little winded, that's a totally different story. And so based on that evaluation by a licensed health provider, we'll determine the need for a test. And through our partnership with both Atrium and then through LabCorp, who's the student lab coordinator, we'll arrange to get you tested. During that testing time, you would need to be put into isolation just to separate yourself from the other students. And then based on the results of the test, which I'd love to say it would come back that day, it's probably not. Many of you have watched across the nation as what's going on with increased numbers of tests, straining the system and causing delays in reporting. So it could be 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. People that are symptomatic are at the front of the list for testing, so it will be as short as possible, but it may inconvenience you for a while till we get a result. But that's one of our pillars, is early identification of symptomatic students and taking them away from the population to where they don't spread the disease anymore. So I'll stop there, because I think when I answered what we're going to do before and what we're going to do during, and see where we go from there.
I'll come back. Quillen made at the beginning of our time together. President Quillen, it is clear that our plan for the fall semester really is very dependent on broadly shared commitments to a set of values. This is not an environment where we're going to be able to enforce lots of rules. We can't hand people a rule book with a bunch of thou shalts and thou shalt nots. But what is really important is for us to share a set of commitments and a set of reciprocal obligations. What kind of advice do you have for students who are concerned about coming into an environment that really depends on that kind of shared commitment? What can we do to help to bolster those values, that sense of accountability?
So I think there's a few things. One, it's exactly right. This is a situation where we rely on everyone in the community to buy into what we're trying to accomplish. And I would say at the outset, if you can't buy into that, if that's not something that you can support or want to do, then I would really urge you not to return to campus, because the campus is depending on everyone's willingness to buy into this. And that's in part because it's not possible. There's no system we could set up that would, in a foolproof way, make sure everybody was obeying all these rules all the time. It's not humanly possible. And therefore, we are relying on our community to buy into what we're trying to accomplish. That said, there's a lot we can do. One, we are going to model the behavior that we want everyone to adopt. And we're talking to some of our returning students, some of our student leaders, about how they can help us do that. So it's pretty simple. Physical distancing, wear a mask, wash your hands. These are three things that are really important to do. Monitor your health is something Dr. Lutz also mentioned. So we are creating a campus where these things are possible to do. We're changing the configuration of classrooms. We're changing how we're going to eat together. We're changing, the ways in which we're going to move around the campus so that we can continue to be together and abide by these important health requirements. So modeling this, buying into the values, and then holding one another accountable. I mean, if someone sees me on campus and I don't have a mask on, I think you should call me out. Hey, Carol, you're not wearing a mask. What the heck? That's the kind of, and I'll be like, oh, I forgot, here, I have it in my pocket. But if we meet people who are saying, no, I just refuse, I won't wear a face shield, I have no reason why I can't, but I just won't, that's not okay, and you can't be here. So I hope that sort of gives you a sense of the ways in which we're trying to create an environment where this is the foundation of the community for this semester. This is what we're called to do right now. No one expected to have to do any of these things. And yet, to model what it means to be in a community where people care about one another, that's what we have to do this semester.
Wonderful. So just as the COVID surge has prompted a rethinking of how people test, many of you who are with us tonight know that the COVID surge has also prompted several colleges and universities to revisit and reverse decisions that they made earlier in the summer to bring students back to campus, understanding that this is a highly fluid situation. How confident are you, President Quillen, that Davidson will not have to follow what those other schools have felt compelled to do?
So it's an interesting question. I mean, confident is not a word that I would use about predicting the future at this time. I think that we make the best decisions that we can with the information that's available to us. Given what is happening in North Carolina, that is to say, a comparatively flat positivity rate with rising cases, an extension of the phase 2 limitations on gathering, I am cautiously optimistic that we will be able to convene at the time that we say we will. That said, I and Dr. Lutz and everyone on this call revisits these decisions on a daily basis, because our priority is to offer the highest quality education in a safe environment. And we're not afraid to say we need to make a change. So for right now, I'm confident. I'm watching what's going on in our state and particularly in our zip code, and I'm confident. People in the town of Davidson are, the town of Davidson is a wear a mask town, and so there's a community buy-in to what we're trying to do. But it's a very fluid and unpredictable situation, and I'm not sufficiently. I am very humble about it.
Dr. Lutz, a follow-up question that's related. Talk to us, if you can, about how Davidson would manage an outbreak on campus. For example, what kind of capacity do we have to quarantine students on campus? You're very familiar with the healthcare infrastructure in the surrounding area. How do you feel about the capacity of not just Davidson College, but the broader healthcare community to manage any surge that we might see between late August and mid-November?
So for me, the starting point is the way this disease affects people in different generations. So in general, looking at the young adult population that all you guys are, so 18 to 22 to 23, most young people do very, very well. So my feeling is that from a symptomatic perspective of our students, we're going to have a fairly low number of symptomatic students. That doesn't mean the disease isn't there. It doesn't mean it's not moving through the population. But it's the symptomatic students that stress the ability to respond. So we have isolation rooms where we can put symptomatic students as they recover. And when that happens, if you're symptomatic and you test positive, you're going to get enrolled in what's called a virtual hospital. So it's not a brick and mortar hospital. It's a construct that provides you, the ill student, with support from afar. And that will include checks by nursing. In Atrium, in our system here in Charlotte, we've been doing this since April. And so the nurses are very experienced in identifying who might be trending worse. And they have very standard ways to do that. When you're in isolation, you'll have a pulse oximeter, which measures your blood oxygen level and your pulse. And you'll have a thermometer to check your temperature. And you'll get checked on a regular basis. If your symptoms get to the point where, okay, we need some intervention, then you get elevated in a level of care and can be admitted to a hospital if needed, bypassing the emergency room or other places where you would expose other people or be exposed to other things. And this system has been working in Charlotte, like I say, since April. It has kept a lot of people out of the hospital, preserving those beds out of the hospital safely and preserving those beds that are needed for the most symptomatic patients. I believe that the capacity exists here to manage a surge. again, mainly because the numbers in our population are going to be relatively low for those people that need to be hospitalized.
So what happened?
If I could just chime in real quick.
Sure.
So I appreciate Dr. Lutz taking the lead on that question. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. He mentioned some nurses that are really experienced in this. Those are atrium nurses that our students would have access to virtually. So you would be virtually checking in with the atrium nurse who's done this all spring. We would also work directly with students to make sure that they are receiving meals. And so someone from the college might text you or just arrange like a daily service, like dropping it off at your door. So we're trying to think really comprehensively about it so that your experience is seamless. And I would just add, if Dean Jefferson doesn't mind, the faculty are anticipating and ready for a student to be able to have to Zoom into a class, even if they were in the class the day before. And so just animating what we've said about shared principles and shared values, it's really important that students are aware of their symptoms so they're not going to class, potentially making other students sick or faculty or other employees. And so we're trying to make it as seamless for the symptomatic student as possible so that they are not kind of falling behind in coursework, and they're also getting the supports that they need.
Wonderful. Dean Jefferson, I think we all know that the experience in the spring was not what any of us would have wished. And I know that students have thought a good deal about what happens in the fall in terms of the nature of the academic experience. So several students asked, what kinds of things have faculty done to deliver remote education better? And one point of really consistent concern is, will faculty have faculty adjusted workloads, expectations between remote learning and a truncated calendar? These are issues that are very much on students' minds right now.
Yes, well, thank you very much for that question. We learned a lot in the spring, okay, in terms of what was necessary to provide education in this environment. So one of the things that the faculty is doing this summer is enrolling in something called our Digital Learning Institute. And this is a resource that we have here on campus that's working out of our library and our Center for Teaching and Learning. And it is providing all the faculty members with the tools and techniques that will allow them to deliver very high quality education using various modes of teaching. Everything from online to some in-person classes. But no matter what the mode that they use, the curriculum will be available for students who are not able to attend synchronously. So there's going to be a lot of flexibility and a lot of emphasis on academic continuity. So Dean McCrae just described a situation where maybe a student wouldn't be able to attend classes in the traditional sense, but we want to make sure that that student is able to continue his or her studies, even though he or she may have to isolate in some way.
Okay.
If I could just follow up a little bit on both on what Dean McCrae and Dean Jefferson just said, we've really tried to create a flexible environment, right? So we want every student, no matter what happens, to be able to continue the classes in which they're enrolled. We want all of our students to have access to the co-curricular activities that make the community at Davidson really a wonderful place to be. Will they be exactly the same? Of course not, they won't be, but everybody is working hard in the way that Dean Jefferson just described. Our faculty are working hard to create experiences for you, whether it's the Center for Civic Engagement, the Center for Career Development, the union. All of these entities are working really hard to make sure that the experiences that make a Davidson education so special and that make the experience of being a community so important, all of those are available, or versions of them are available to you no matter where you are. And again, this is the principle of equity. Not everyone is going to be able to return to campus. Not everyone wants to return to campus. Some people want to live off campus. So we really are very much focused on how do we make sure that everybody has access to these experiences while we're safeguarding the health and well-being of our faculty and staff?
Wonderful. So, Dean McCrae, lots of students are trying to flesh out a picture in their minds of what their day-to-day experience at Davidson will look like this fall. So, for example, we know that large groups won't be able to gather. What does that mean? Like, as people go through their day-to-day lives, like, how many people can either formally or informally spend time in closer proximity? Students know that their CAT cards will access their specific residence hall. Can they visit with their friends in other buildings? Will the gym be open to non-athletes? All those kinds of things. So can you help fill in some detail, some color about what life will look like here?
Yeah, and so thank you. I want to honor what we were saying before about kind of being able to predict the future and what if there's a surge, and there are disparate impacts on some of our student populations. International students are taking a huge risk, a huge leap of faith, and even coming to the United States now that our government's made it welcome for them to do so, right? And so I want all students to know that we honor the risks that they're taking, the sacrifices they're making, and just coming back. And so we want campus life to be as similar as possible, but recognizing that right now, I can't imagine the Nisbet Fitness Center being open. It seems like a little risky to kind of offer that. We've modeled scenarios in which we're cleaning it on a more regular basis, that we're limiting the number of students there. And so I guess a placeholder statement or kind of a framework is, if we think we can do it responsibly and protect the health of our community, we'll do our best to do it. And I'm a Brené Brown fan, clear is kind. And so open consumption will not be permitted in Martin Court. And so I could sit here and try to dance for you, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. And so we want students to know what the expectations are. And I also want students to know that you have to wear a mask to go to CVS. The brick house is not going to be the same brick house that you may have anticipated it being. People will greet you at the door looking for your mask, and if you don't have one, they'll give you one. And restaurant spaces are clearly, you sit really far apart, and there's almost no seats at a bar. So I'm trying to help give some texture and kind of nuance to students. So does that mean that we're all on yoga mats 6 feet apart? If students want that, I'll buy the yoga mats. If students have really creative ideas about how to be together, we will pursue those ideas and make them happen. And Dean Snipes will communicate really clearly, like each person in a room or apartment or a room, they can probably have one guest. You probably shouldn't have the same guest at the same time. And you should probably treat your roommate contracts and apartment agreements really, really seriously. Many of you already have underlying health conditions, and you've chosen to live with students who respect those. And so it's really important that in each living arrangement, you have someone who is a go-to for your DoorDash, or you understand that your roommate really can't have unanticipated guests over because it does present challenges. And so, I don't know if I've answered all the questions that you've asked, but I'm trying to give students the tools to feel really empowered, but also just be really clear and honest that it's going to be different. And if there's a way that we can do things in person healthily, we will pursue those by checking in with our partners at Davidson Family Medicine and certainly Dr. Lutz.
The FAQ page explains very clearly how meal service will function for eating houses and other organizations that provide food. Beyond meals, what should students know about Patterson Court life in the fall semester?
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest opportunities that we have, is to really think about the value of those organizations. And so what will community service look like? You know, I've been able to talk to a couple Patterson Court leaders, and they're thinking about virtual service or awareness raising. I think Mike Good may have communicated that we're probably not going to charge those organizations rent for this upcoming year. So can every organization promise, I'm making this up on the spot, I probably shouldn't be, but can every organization help students like by purchasing masks, right? Or host mask making workshops? I think the organizations that solve that challenge, Chris, are going to be the ones that help build a sense of belonging and mattering for students at Davidson, and not let the disease win, but rather we're showing our fighting spirit in a different kind of way. And we're actually proving that we're servant leaders by bringing value to students. I mean, it's really hard to think about how the COVID crisis is impacting communities of color, and then, you know, taking our thinking over here, thinking about, okay, how does my eating house, like, I think there's a match there. And I think students working in groups toward thinking about solving these societal problems, I think that's the key. And so maybe it's not about, you know, the selection day celebration, but rather about leveraging the willpower and creativity of an entire house of individuals who care about these topics, who care about our employees, who care about their peers, and who are going to help us come up with really creative solutions.
Wonderful. So
Chris,
while
I wanted to,
Sure.
I realized I didn't answer a very important question that you asked me that students may be worried about, and that is the fall semester and faculty expectations. Would you mind if I just took a moment to
Please.
address that? Okay.
Please.
Because the length of the semester is going to be different. We're going to be here from August till right before Thanksgiving. And the faculty have given a lot of thought about the fact that we're going to have a shorter semester just in terms of calendar time. Typical semester here at Davidson is 15 weeks, and we're going to be working with about 13. And so really what we've been emphasizing is not a matter of taking 15 weeks of material and squeezing it into 13, but rather a fundamental redesign of our courses and curriculum so that we can deliver a tremendous courses and content, subject matter in the amount of space of time that we have available to us, so that it doesn't feel to the student like the same amount of information is being condensed and compressed into those 13 weeks. Rather, what they will feel is that, oh, this course has been rethought so that I am able to manage the work and expectations of me in the time available. So I just want to make that point clear because I could see how a student could be very concerned about that. And thank you for giving me the time to do that.
No, thank you. I think you just put a lot of minds at ease. But
Chris, can I just follow up really quickly on that?
Sure.
What Dean Jefferson just said. I think that this notion of reimagining and rethinking what we've always done is what is characterizing our entire community. I know student leaders, leaders of student organizations who are thinking, we will not be able to do what we have always done. How are we going to honor the reason why we're together in this environment? And Dean McCrae was also talking about this. I think that's the spirit in which we're approaching this. How can I provide service to my community in this environment? We have a bunch of students who are really interested in voting and voter registration, and they're really actively working, okay, how do we help people vote in this environment? We have, performing arts organizations. How are we going to function in this environment, given that we can't do what we normally do? And I think that's the spirit, that's the creativity that we're trying to honor and celebrate and support here at Davidson, because we can't change the external environment. All we can change is how we respond to it and the creativity and the energy that we bring to it, always with an awareness that our responsibility is for something larger than ourselves.
Absolutely. Dean Jefferson, has the faculty made any kind of change in the PassFail policy? And what happens to a student who gets to October and gets sick enough that she's not able to continue to do coursework? Will the process for taking an incomplete, will that change? Would a student who had to go home before Thanksgiving, would that affect that student's status as a Davidson student in any way that students should be aware of now?
Well, first, with respect to the PassFail policy, returning students will remember that we made a change for the spring semester only with regards to liberalizing the use of the PassFail option. That was an understanding by the faculty of being one semester. And so unless the faculty decides to make another change, we would revert back to the normal policies of the college for the fall. Now, in terms of students who might fall ill, so ill that they couldn't continue their coursework, as always the case, we would look at that on a case-by-case basis, where is typically the case that professors and students interact and discuss what the appropriate response is. And typically incompletes are something that would be offered if a student could not continue. But I wouldn't want to generalize because usually when something like that comes up, it's better to take it on a case-by-case basis. How that might impact their overall status at the college if they were to get incomplete, I think depends on other factors around the student's situation that particular administration officials working with the student and the family would look at in terms of determining how the student's overall status of the at the college would change as a result.
Great, thank you. Dr. Lutz, I want to come back to a couple of help questions, if I may. If my roommate gets sick, tests positive, what becomes of me? What happens to me? How does that affect my life?
So if your roommate becomes sick and tests positive, they will be moved to an isolation room. And what we would ask of you in your situation is to be extremely diligent about your protective measures that you can take. So masking, washing hands, etc. We'll ask you to sort of quarantine in place in your room, work with you about food, as well as going to class virtually, kind of taking a step back from the student population and see how it shakes out. Unfortunately, quarantine is about 2 weeks. And while testing would be awesome to say we test you and then you're done if you're negative, the problem is the way the tests work is if there's not enough of a viral load, it won't detect it. So say 6 days in, you have a test and it's negative, that doesn't necessarily shorten that period of quarantine. And unfortunately, that's just sort of the way this disease works.
Dr. Lutz, a couple of students asked about opportunities to test again before they go home at Thanksgiving. Students who are thinking about folks at home, going back into that environment. If a student had concerns, could he or she get a test before they go home?
So there's plenty of opportunities to get tests, and I think those concerns would be based on how the semester goes and what it looks like on campus as compared to off campus. That is something, honestly, we've kind of looked at, but we have not formally addressed in terms of any policy at this point in time. But there's many mechanisms that people can get tests, so I don't see an issue with that if that's a concern prior to going home because of, say, an elderly grandparent or a family member who has an underlying illness. So certainly we can figure a way to accommodate that.
Okay.
I would just chime in and add that, I mean, and I think Dr. Lutz has alluded to this, I mean, CBS is in Davidson is administering tests. It's something that a student can talk about with their family about their ability or willingness to afford that. I also want to honor that there's some states that have now said, like, when you come home back to this state, you have to quarantine. And so I know that weighs heavily on our domestic students' minds. I know that when international students went home, some of them had to quarantine and not immediately be with their family. And so that's actually happening in the United States as well. So I think that's going to weigh heavily on students' minds. And so it really raises the bar for all of us then to really be as responsible as we can, to abide by our shared commitments, because some of the choices that you make in October really do impact when you can be with your family again in November.
Sure. Dean McCrae, around Thanksgiving, several students asked if the decision to go home at Thanksgiving, they understand that if you go, you're not coming back. But that decision to go home at Thanksgiving, is that each student's choice, or is that an expectation and any student who wants to stay will need to demonstrate an approved reason for staying?
Yeah, it's right. I mean, we have to trust you. And so we're not going to fight you on your reason for staying at that point in time, but we really do need you to abide by our community expectations that, again, will be modeled by the town of Davidson. And so if it's a better choice for you academically, or a better choice for you and your family, for you to not go home or go to, leave campus at Thanksgiving, you can certainly stay here with the understanding that we're not sure what this is going to look like. And so if it's 500 of you, there might be more diversity or variety at the dining hall. If it's 100 students, it might feel, it's just going to feel different. And so we ask for your patience and understanding. And we ask that you work with the staff on figuring out what it's going to look like and how best to meet your needs.
So Dean McCrae, if my current housing arrangement involves me having a roommate, as it does with pretty much everybody, and I get back to campus and I find out that my roommate chose not to come back to campus, do I get that room to myself all semester?
I would say most likely yes. That does not mean that you can have more than one student visit you at a time. So we really need for students to be flexible with us. But yeah, I can't imagine that we're going to assign someone to live with you.
Okay, so here's a related question. What if I know what my housing situation is in the fall? I choose not to come back in the fall, but I want to come back in the spring. I really like the place that I was slated to live in. Can I have that place in the spring semester?
I would say that if you've been good to your RA and you've gone to their programs and you have good rapport with Dean Snipes, this might be better. But I would also say that we don't know what the next 6 months is going to bring. Would we like to honor that commitment to you? Absolutely. But we might need a little bit more flexibility in case the course of the disease or the semester pivots in a way that we didn't understand.
A couple of deadline questions, and Dean McCrae, you may be the best person to at least start with. As students think about the fall, I know two questions are in many of their minds. First of all, is there a date specific by which I need to let Davidson know what my plans are for the fall? And then related to that, if I decide that I'm coming back and I get back here, can I change my mind?
Yeah, I mean, so you're certainly not a prisoner at Davidson. And so, so if you come back and you're homesick, or it's not what you expected, or you didn't believe me when I say the brick house wasn't going to let you party there, and you want to go back home, you can certainly do that. You have until, I believe, 10 days into the semester to make that decision. Again, international students have different pressures. And so international students letting the International Student Programs Office know as soon as possible is helpful in terms of planning and visa arrangements. If you're a student and you have a sense that you're less likely to come than you are to come, letting us know sooner than later just helps us with all of this planning. It helps us plan isolation spaces, quarantine spaces. It helps us think about programming differently. And we're not going to, and you don't need to prove to us why you're not coming. Just simply email deanofstudents@davidson.edu to let us know. And like I said, there's no firm deadline, but knowing sooner than later is really helpful.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that. I mean, our assumption is that you're doing what you told us that you're doing. And if that's changing, the sooner you let Dean McCrae and his folks know, the better. It helps us enormously, and it helps other students.
Dean Jefferson, I think I know the answer to this question, but I want to ask it because several students asked it. If I'm going through the course of the fall semester and I have a class that's being taught in person, and I become concerned about going to that class for health-related reasons, may I choose to not go to class? May I make the decision to continue that course remotely?
Yes, because faculty have been charged with the responsibility, which I know has been broadly embraced, that the materials in every class will be available asynchronously. So what that means is that they're preparing for the situation where, for maybe health-related reasons, a student is not able to attend in person. And therefore, there will be an alternative mode of delivering that content. Now, of course, there may be some difference in the field, because, you know, if you are in person for some period of time during the semester and then you as the individual student have to shift, then there's going to be if you will, a tactile difference in the feel of that, but the ability to continue will be there. And that is something that faculty are working very hard on this summer. And I just would want students' expectations to know that the quality will still be there, the outreach to make it a meaningful experience for the student will be there, but the feel of it may be different, particularly if you're shifting midway.
Wonderful. We are unfortunately approaching the end of our time together. I know it's gone by very quickly, and I know that we didn't get to every question that's on your mind, but President Quillen, I'd like to leave you with the last word, and I'd like to ask, what kind of advice or strong suggestion would you offer to students, maybe especially first-year students, as they think about coming to this place and starting this fabulous new adventure? It will be different, but it will be a glorious adventure. And I just wonder if there is any particular piece of wisdom or advice that you would share with those people.
Well, thanks, Chris. And I want to thank Dr. Lutz and Dean McCrae and Dean Jefferson and you, Chris Alexander, for joining us. I think I would say this is a completely different environment than the one we've operated in the past. And it's a new environment for all of us. None of us has lived through anything quite like this, or very few of us have lived through anything quite like this before. And therefore, I would say, come to campus with your energy and your creativity and your commitment to building on the strong sense of community that characterizes Davidson in this environment where that is more important than ever. Our students will find ways of honoring the reason why this group exists or that club exists in this environment, because that's what we do here. And so if we all come together with the knowledge, not just the expectation, but with the knowledge that it's going to be different, just as all of our lives are different right now, and we create from that the best and strongest community that we can, always mindful of our obligation to people beyond ourselves, then I think it offers a genuine opportunity. And I would just encourage students to use their incredible gifts of intellect and creativity and commitment and compassion to help us model what it means to be an intellectual community that seeks the truth in this environment.
Amen. Thank you, President Quillen. Dr. Lutz, Dean Jefferson, Dean McCrae, thank you so very much for sharing your time this evening. And to all of you who are with us in virtual land, thank you for being with us. We continue to wish you a safe, restful, fun summer, and we look forward to seeing you here in Davidson very, very soon. Take care and stay in touch. Have a good evening.